Austin, Texas. If one takes the time to travel throughout the center of the city, you may begin to notice that there are two vastly different parts that make up the city's whole: west and east. In the western side of Austin, you can find large single-family houses, predominantly white neighborhoods, and an economic vibrance the likes of which Austin has come to be known for in the modern day. However, once one passes under the interstate and into the east side of the city, the landscape changes. Far more industrial, and in many cases visibly older, East Austin is where much of the city's Black and Hispanic population is found. As the eastern side of the city now becomes the target of rapid gentrification, the history of this area and the people who have lived there is slowly and visibly beginning to fade away, and along with it, the history of Austin's segregationist past. While it is easy to point to the interstate as the border that, as Emily Scott says in their paper, Austin, a City Divided, concretizes racial divisions and serves as a symbolic and physical barrier between racialized minorities and the white majority, the racial division of Austin far outdates I-35. But there is a silence in the narrative of Austin's segregation, and to uncover it, we must take a walk down to Waller Creek. Spanning approximately 7 miles and flowing from North Austin southwards into the Colorado River, Waller Creek is named after Edwin Waller. Waller, at the time a wealthy businessman, local judge, signer of the Texas Declaration of Independence, and slave owner, was tasked with drafting the city plan for Texas's new capital city in 1838. This new capital was to be named Austin, Texas. The city was to be contained between the borders of two creeks, Shoal Creek to the western side, and the aptly named Waller Creek to the east. Waller Creek was a prominent landmark in Austin's past, and is still an important feature of Austin's landscape. However, today, it is hidden between buildings and nestled beneath bridges, many of us remaining oblivious to the creek that lies beneath and beside our feet. While Waller Creek appears shallow, in many places no deeper than a few inches, it was and still is prone to devastating and frequent flooding whenever Austin receives excess levels of rainfall. This flood water level marker on UT's campus shows how high the creek water is capable of rising. The riparian floodplain of Waller Creek created an edge portion of the city that was not only undesirable, but hazardous for potential residents, meaning land in these flood-prone areas was available and cheap to acquire. Following the end of the Civil War and throughout Reconstruction, many newly freed ex-slaves needed housing and were in search of places to call their own. Austin attracted a large population of these new citizens. However, seldom allowed to settle in the predominantly white areas of the city, they set up their communities in these cheap and untouched areas of Waller Creek's floodplain. These people settled the bottomlands of Austin, following a trend found in much of the country at the time. As mentioned in Catherine Leah Pace's article, Forgetting Waller Creek, An Environmental History of Race, Parks, and Planning in Downtown Austin, Texas, Black residents were sold steep land near industry, and most often lowlands susceptible to pestilence and flooding. Black populations were led to inhabit lands deemed too hazardous and prone to catastrophe for white settlers, who ignored such areas and, when possible, forced their black neighbors to reside there. This resulted in the formation of large freedmen communities in the Waller Creek watershed. This map shows the concentration of black households in Austin in 1875 and 1910. While this map shows the 100-year floodplain of Waller Creek. And this map combines them both, showing where the households were in respect to the Waller Creek floodplain. The most prominent of these communities was the Red River Street community, named and described by Michelle M. Mears in their book, And Grace Will Lead Me Home, African American Freedmen Communities in Austin, Texas, as a thriving area of black commerce and housing. Mears describes the community as such. In 1872, black occupants of Red River Street community worked as blacksmiths, carpenters, hack drivers, laborers, wagoners, porters, some at the Capitol, shoemakers, stonemasons, and well diggers. However, proximity to Waller Creek caused occasional problems for the residents of Red River Street community, for the creek was prone to flooding. Rises of the Colorado River also backed up into Waller Creek. This did not deter the communities from growing, however, and they continued to start businesses and even establish schools. Huston-Tillotson University, at the time named Tillotson College, is in this area and is still in operation today. Unfortunately, the bustling development of the Waller Creek area meant that more lives were in danger of its destructive flooding. Flooding has been frequent throughout its history. The flood of 1896 was a severe 100-year flood. And this is a photograph of Waller Creek following a flood in 1915. This picture is also from the flood of 1915. And the flood of 1935 remains a poignant memory in Austin's public consciousness. Accounts exist of floods carrying away houses and breaking dams and eddies, leading to catastrophic destruction of life and property, and often leaving the city without water or lights. These floods were absolutely devastating and very frequent throughout Austin's history. The freedmen communities relegated to this area surrounding Waller Creek were in constant danger of natural disaster, being not only the victims of racism and segregation, but environmental factors as well, increasing the difficulty of their new lives as free citizens. This is known as double exposure, defined in Pace's other article, Shifting Terrains of Risk, A History of Natural Hazards and Displacement in 3 Historic Black Communities of Central Austin, Texas, as a framework that encourages scholars to consider the multiple and overlapping processes of change that shape regions, cities, and communities' vulnerability to environmental and economic hazards. With the advent of the 20th century and the growing pervasiveness of Jim Crow-era laws, Austin's black communities faced a new threat. On March 22, 1928, Austin decided upon a new city plan, one that would cement the segregation of the city and solidify the racial geography Waller Creek's floodplain had begun by creating a specific black district. Truly a product of the Jim Crow era, the plan sought to clearly define where the racial boundaries in the city should be. By this time, some black Austinites had begun to move further west to other parts of the city, outside of the eastern concentration they had historically been relegated to. This new plan, however, sought to erase any black communities that had taken form outside of the eastern part of the city and forcibly relocate them. Because the majority of the city's black population already lived in East Austin, the framers of the plan, consultants Koch and Fowler, decided this would be the best place to relocate those who did not already reside there. An excerpt from the plan reads as follows. In our studies in Austin, we have found that black residents are present in small numbers in practically all sections of the city, excepting the area just east of East Avenue and south of the city cemetery. This area seems to be all black population. It is our recommendation that the nearest approach to the solution of the race segregation problem will be the recommendation of this district as a black district, and that all facilities and conveniences be provided the black residents in this district as an incentive to draw the black population to this area. This will eliminate the necessity of duplication of white and black schools, white and black parks, and other duplicate facilities for this area. This plan sought to save money by eliminating their need for separate schools and other public facilities, essentially taking an out-of-sight, out-of-mind approach. Ethically dubious and morally questionable, this plan sought to remove black citizens from the center of the city so that growth could be facilitated in a minority-free environment. All of this was in spite of the 1917 Supreme Court ruling that zoning laws which segregated were illegal. By withholding utilities and ensuring the only places minorities could receive municipal services were located to East Austin, the city government effectively forced all of Austin's black residents east towards the Waller Creek area, defining the part of the city in which we see most minority residents live to this day, and destroying all of the thriving black communities that had come to appear in other parts of Austin. While the Austin City Master Plan of 1928 defined segregation in Austin, and the interstate came to mark its boundary, Waller Creek and its floods were the forces that began this process many years ago. The prevailing narrative around Austin's segregationist past point to the 1928 Master Plan, but this plan points to another cause. Because of its hidden nature, much of Waller Creek's influence on Austin's black communities has been forgotten. So next time you find yourself downtown, or at Waterloo Park, which is built upon and along Waller Creek, take notice of the water that flows by you. This water has a history. Waller Creek is a place that has defined Austin, then and now.